The darkness of space suddenly filled with massive ships, each one bigger than entire cities on Earth. The Kelvan Empire had arrived, and their war fleet stretched across the sky like a nightmare made real. These aliens had conquered hundreds of worlds, and now they hung above Earth like hungry wolves circling their prey. Commander Vextar sat on his command throne, his scaled hands gripping the armrests as he looked down at the blue planet below. His yellow eyes gleamed with satisfaction. Another primitive world to add to the Empire's collection. He had done this dance 1,000 times before with 1,000 different species, and it always ended the same way. The commander's voice boomed across space as he began his usual speech. Every word was carefully chosen to strike fear into the hearts of those who heard it. "People of Earth," he announced, his voice reaching every radio, television, and communication device on the planet, "you now face the might of the Kelvan. Empire, you have exactly 24 of your hours to surrender completely. Lay down all weapons, submit to our rule, or watch your world burn." Vexatar leaned back in his chair, waiting for the usual response. Most species either surrendered immediately or sent desperate pleas for mercy. Some tried to negotiate. A few foolishly attempted to fight back with their primitive weapons. All of them eventually begged, but Earth's response was different. A single transmission came from the planet's surface. The signal was clear and strong, reaching every ship in the Kelvan fleet. On their screens appeared a human woman, middle-aged with dark hair and tired eyes. She wore simple clothes, nothing that suggested military rank or political power. She looked like someone you might pass on the street without a second glance. "My name is Ji-Ho Kim," she said in a calm, steady voice. "I speak for humanity today." She paused for a moment, looking directly into the camera as if she could see through space itself into Vextar's eyes. "You have one warning. Leave now." The transmission ended. Commander Vextar stared at the blank screen for several seconds, before throwing back his head and laughing. The sound echoed through his ship's bridge, and soon his officers joined in. A warning? From these primitive creatures who barely knew how to leave their own planet? "Did you hear that?" Vextar gasped between laughs. "They gave us a warning. These insects think they can threaten the Kelvan Empire." He wiped tears from his eyes and looked at his tactical officer. "How many ships do they have in orbit?" "None, Commander," the officer replied, checking his sensors. "Their most advanced vessels are still primitive chemical rockets, nothing that could threaten even our smallest escort ship. And their ground defenses? Nuclear weapons, primitive missiles, some energy weapons, nothing we haven't seen before on 100 other worlds." Vextar nodded, still chuckling. "Then why do they think they can warn us?" But as the laughter died down, something began to bother the alien commander. His tactical officer, a veteran of 50 conquest campaigns, was frowning at his display screens. The communications officer kept adjusting her equipment, as if something was wrong with the readings. "Commander," the tactical officer said slowly, "there's something strange here." "What kind of strange?" "Well, sir, when we arrive at a new world, we usually see massive panic. Ships fleeing the system, desperate evacuation attempts, military vessels scrambling to defensive positions." He gestured at his screens. "But look at Earth." Vextar studied the tactical display. Earth hung peacefully in space, looking exactly as it had when they arrived. No ships were launching, no military formations were moving. The planet's cities continued their normal activities as if a massive alien war fleet wasn't hanging directly above them. "Maybe they're too primitive to understand the threat," suggested the communications officer. "No," the tactical officer shook his head. "Our translation systems worked perfectly. They understood every word. And that woman, Ji-Ho Kim, she didn't look afraid at all." Vextar felt a small chill run down his spine. In all his years of conquest, he had never seen a species respond with such complete calm. Even the most warlike races showed some sign of preparation when faced with the Empire's might. But Earth just sat there quiet and still. "Run deeper scans," he ordered. "Check for hidden defenses, cloaked ships, anything we might have missed." The bridge crew worked frantically, their instruments, probing every inch of the solar system. But they found nothing threatening. Earth remained defenseless, its people apparently unconcerned about their impending doom. The commander tried to shake off his unease. Perhaps these humans were simply too stupid to understand their situation. It wouldn't be the first time he'd encountered a species that didn't grasp the reality of their predicament until the shooting started. But Ji-Ho Kim's words echoed in his mind. You have one warning. What could these primitive creatures possibly do to warn the mighty Kelvan Empire? The 24 hours passed, like a slow countdown to doom. Commander Vextar watched the timer on his display tick down to 0, expecting to see panic spreading across Earth's surface. But the planet remained eerily calm. No desperate last-minute surrenders came through their communication channels. No frantic evacuation ships launched from Earth's surface. The humans simply continued their daily lives, as if nothing had changed. Time's up, Vextar announced to his bridge crew. His voice carried the cold authority of someone who had destroyed countless worlds. Begin the bombardment. Target their major population centers first. Make it quick. But as his weapons officer reached for the firing controls, something impossible began to happen. The ship's sensors started screaming with alarm signals. Energy readings spiked across every instrument on the bridge. The tactical officer's face went pale as he stared at his displays, unable to believe what he was seeing. Commander, he whispered, his voice shaking. We're detecting massive energy signatures throughout the entire solar system. What kind of energy signatures? Vextar demanded, leaning forward in his command chair. I don't know, sir. They're unlike anything in our databases. The readings are off the charts. On the main display screen, the peaceful image of Earth's solar system began to change. Strange lights flickered in the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter. Objects that their sensors had dismissed as ordinary space rocks suddenly blazed with power. Ancient structures, hidden for countless ages, began to awaken from their long sleep. The communications officer gasped and pointed at her screen. Commander, look at the moon! Everyone on the bridge turned to stare at the image of Earth's natural satellite. The moon's far side, the part that always faced away from Earth, was no longer the cratered wasteland they had seen before. Massive, geometric patterns were appearing on its surface, glowing with an eerie blue light. The patterns looked deliberate, artificial, like some kind of enormous circuit board carved into the moon's rock. What is that? Vextar breathed. Before anyone could answer, their screens flickered. The image of the moon disappeared, replaced by the face of another human woman. She looked different from Ji-Ho Kim, younger, with short black hair and intense, dark eyes, but she had the same unnaturally calm expression, as if she had been expecting this moment for a very long time. My name is Hannah Park, she said simply. We tried to warn you. Vextar found his voice. What are those structures? What's happening to your solar system? Hannah Park's expression didn't change. When she spoke, her words sent ice through the veins of every alien on the bridge. You misunderstood something important, Commander. Humanity doesn't guard Earth because it's our home. We guard Earth because it's our prison. The bridge fell silent, except for the constant beeping of alarms. Vextar stared at the human woman, trying to process what she had just said. Prison, what could she possibly mean? You see, Hannah continued, her voice still perfectly calm, your species isn't the first to come here with threats. Others have tried before you. They all made the same mistake you're making right now. What mistake? Vextar managed to ask. You assumed we were helpless because we haven't spread across the galaxy. You thought we were primitive because we stay on one small planet. But you never asked the right question. She paused, letting her words sink in. You never wondered why a species capable of what you're about to witness chose to stay in one tiny corner of space. The tactical officer's hands were shaking as he studied his instruments. Commander, he said urgently, I'm detecting more structures. They're everywhere, hidden in comets, buried in planets, scattered throughout this entire system. How did we miss them? Because they were designed to be missed, Hannah answered, though the question hadn't been directed at her. Our ancestors built them long ago, when they realized what they had become, what we had all become. Vextar felt a growing sense of dread. Something was very wrong here. His species had conquered hundreds of worlds, faced dozens of different alien races, but he had never encountered anything like this. The humans weren't acting like victims, they weren't even acting like warriors preparing for battle. They were acting like jailers who had just realized their prisoners were about to escape. Commander, his weapons officer called out, panic creeping into his voice. Our targeting systems aren't responding. Something's interfering with our weapons. What about our engines? Vextar demanded. The engineering officer checked his displays, and his face went white. Sir, our jump drives are offline. Something's blocking our faster-than-light capabilities. We can't leave the system. For the first time since arriving at Earth, Commander Vexistar felt genuine fear. His mighty fleet, capable of destroying planets, was suddenly trapped in this quiet solar system with its strange, calm humans and their awakening ancient machines. On the screen, Hannah Park smiled for the first time. It wasn't a pleasant smile. The Kelvan fleet hung motionless in space, their advanced sensors working frantically to understand what was happening around them. Commander Vextar ordered his science teams to conduct the deepest scans they had ever performed, pushing their technology to its absolute limits. What they discovered made every alien on every ship question everything they thought they knew about the universe. "Commander," the chief science officer reported, his voice trembling with disbelief, "we need to look at Mars again." The main screen shifted to show the red planet in unprecedented detail. What the Kelvan had initially dismissed as natural geological features now revealed their true nature under intense scrutiny. The massive canyon systems weren't carved by water or wind. They were blast craters, enormous gouges in the planet's surface that could only have been created by weapons of unimaginable power. "Those aren't natural formations," the science officer continued. "Mars was bombarded by something that makes our planet killer weapons look like children's toys. The entire northern hemisphere was melted and reformed. Whatever hit this planet did it repeatedly, over and over, until the surface was completely destroyed." Vextar stared at the images. In all his campaigns across the galaxy, he had never seen destruction on this scale. "How long ago?" "The isotope dating suggests millions of years, sir, but that's not the strangest part." The officer's hands shook as he adjusted the display. "We're detecting the same energy signatures we're seeing throughout the system. Whatever destroyed Mars is the same technology that's powering those structures." Before Vextar could respond, another officer called out from across the bridge. "Commander, you need to see this. The asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter." The screen changed again, showing what every spacefaring species knew as a common feature of solar systems: a ring of rocky debris orbiting the star. But the enhanced scans revealed something horrifying. The asteroids weren't random chunks of rock. They were fragments of something much larger, something that had been completely obliterated. "It's a planet," the science officer whispered. Or it was. The debris field shows clear signs of artificial materials mixed with natural rock. There was a world here, and something completely annihilated it, turned an entire planet into dust and rubble. A chill ran through the bridge crew. 2 planets in one system had been destroyed by weapons beyond their understanding. What kind of species had that level of destructive power? Suddenly, every communication array on every ship in the fleet activated simultaneously. Not just the Kelvan vessels. Every piece of communication equipment throughout the entire galaxy began receiving the same signal. Deep space monitoring stations that had been silent for centuries suddenly came online. Ancient relay beacons that explorers had found scattered across distant star systems began transmitting in perfect coordination. The voice that emerged from every speaker was calm and measured, exactly like the previous human representatives. But when the image appeared on their screens, something was different about this one. The human looked normal at first, a middle-aged man with kind eyes and graying hair who introduced himself as Sungmin Lee. But as he spoke, his image began to flicker. Like a hologram losing power, his human appearance wavered and shifted. Underneath, something else was trying to show through, something that hurt to look at directly, as if their eyes weren't designed to process what they were seeing. "I want to understand what's happening," Sungmin said, his voice echoing across every ship in the galaxy simultaneously. "You've discovered the scars we left behind, and now you're afraid. You should be." His image flickered again, and for just a moment, the aliens caught a glimpse of what lay beneath the human facade. It was ancient beyond measure, powerful beyond comprehension, and utterly alien despite wearing a human face. "We are the species that broke the fundamental laws of reality," he continued. We learned to move faster than light should allow. We bent space and time to our will. We reached into dimensions that were never meant to be touched. We became gods, and gods should never have existed. Vextar found himself unable to speak, unable to even move. Every instinct screamed at him to flee, but his ships were still trapped in the system. The speed of light isn't just a physical constant, Sungmin explained, his form continuing to shift between human and something unrecognizable. It's a cage we built around ourselves when we realized what we had become. Those forbidden zones in space that your people avoid. We created them when we broke reality so badly that it still hasn't healed. The truth hit the Kelvan commander like a physical blow. Every spacefaring civilization knew about the dead zones, regions of space where ships simply disappeared, where the laws of physics seemed to work differently. They were natural hazards to be avoided, mysteries that science couldn't explain. But they weren't natural at all. Every legend your people tell about apex predators, about creatures that hunt entire civilizations for sport, about beings that exist beyond death itself, they're all describing the same thing, us. What humanity became before we realized we had to stop ourselves. The image of Sungmin flickered one final time, and what showed through made several Kelvan officers collapse from sheer terror. It was beautiful and horrible, ancient and eternal, something that had transcended every limitation of physical existence. We built this prison to contain ourselves, he said softly, and you just tried to break us out. Commander Vextar's voice cracked as he shouted orders across his bridge. All ships, emergency retreat. Jump to hyperspace immediately. His fingers hammered against his command console, desperately trying to activate their faster-than-light engines. Nothing happened. The familiar hum of charging jump drives remained silent. Sir, the engines aren't responding, his chief engineer reported, panic clear in his voice. It's like something is actively blocking our technology. Our power systems are working, but the jump drives won't engage. Around the Kelvan fleet, space itself began to change. What had seemed like empty vacuum now rippled and twisted like water, disturbed by an unseen hand. Stars in the distance flickered and bent as reality warped around them. The aliens watched in growing terror as the very fabric of the universe seemed to respond to some invisible command. From Earth's surface, objects began to rise. At first, they looked like the primitive spacecraft the Kelvan had dismissed earlier. Simple metal cylinders with basic chemical propulsion. But as they climbed higher into space, their true nature became clear. The crude exteriors fell away, like discarded shells, revealing vessels that defied every law of physics the aliens understood. These weren't spaceships. They were something far worse. Those aren't transport vessels, Vextar's tactical officer whispered, staring at his instruments in disbelief. They're prison ships, mobile containment units, and something inside them is trying to get out. The first of the Earth vessels reached the edge of space, and its hull began to crack. Not from damage or system failure, but from the immense pressure of something inside pushing against its walls. Brilliant light leaked through the growing fissures, light that hurt to look at directly, and seemed to move with purpose and intelligence. Then the first prisoner broke free. What emerged from the fractured hull couldn't be properly described in any language the Kelvan knew. It had once been human, perhaps millions of years ago, but it had evolved beyond anything that should exist in normal space. It moved without a physical body, existing as pure thought and energy, yet somehow more real and present than anything. Around it, Commander Vextar watched his sensors go crazy as the entity turned its attention toward his fleet. His instruments registered impossible readings, negative mass, inverted time flows, temperatures that existed below absolute zero and above the theoretical maximum. This thing wasn't just breaking the laws of physics, it was rewriting them as it moved. It's looking at us, his communications officer gasped, her scaled face pale with terror. I can feel it in my mind. It's been alone for so long. It's hungry for contact, for interaction, for... She never finished the sentence. The entity had noticed her thoughts, and in that moment of connection, something passed between them. The officer's eyes went wide, then completely black, then... She began to smile in a way that was definitely not Kelvan. More prison ships were opening now. Ancient beings that had been contained since before the first civilizations learned to count were stretching into freedom. Some had bodies that shifted through dimensions the aliens couldn't perceive. Others existed as living mathematics, as conscious equations that could rewrite the rules of existence. A few appeared almost human, but moved with predatory grace. That made every survival instinct scream in warning. They're not attacking us, Vextar realized with growing horror. They're hunting us. The difference was terrifying. An attack would have been quick, violent, and mercifully brief, but these entities had been imprisoned for eons, with nothing but time to think, to plan, to imagine what they might do if they ever encountered other intelligent life again. They weren't interested in simple destruction. They wanted to play. The first Kelvan ship to be caught was the escort vessel Thunderstrike. One of the entities, something that looked like a human woman but cast shadows in directions that didn't exist, simply appeared on their bridge. She didn't break in or teleport or use any technology. She just decided to be there. And reality rearranged itself to accommodate her wish. "Hello," she said pleasantly to the terrified crew. "I haven't spoken to anyone new in such a long time. Shall we have a conversation?" What happened next was broadcast across all Kelvan communication channels, though no one could explain how. The crew of Thunderstrike began to change, not physically, but fundamentally. Their thoughts became visible, as colored lights around their heads. Their memories started playing out as solid holograms in the air. The entity guided them through increasingly impossible experiences, teaching them to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously while remaining perfectly conscious of every moment. From his command ship, Vextar watched his people discover what it meant to transcend normal existence. They didn't die. Death would have been a mercy. Instead, they became something new, something that existed in the spaces between reality, aware, and conscious, but no longer bound by the limitations of their original forms. "Sir," his remaining tactical officer reported, his voice barely a whisper, 17 more ships have gone dark. The entities aren't destroying them. They're playing with the crews, experimenting, learning." Another entity materialized near Vextar's flagship, this one appearing as a man in simple clothes who walked on empty space as if it were solid ground. He waved cheerfully at the bridge windows, then began to juggle small suns he had apparently created from nothing. The solar system had become a playground for beings that had forgotten what it meant to be mortal, and the Kelvan fleet was there. First new entertainment in millions of years, 3 ships. Out of the mighty Kelvan fleet that had arrived to conquer Earth, only 3 vessels managed to escape the solar system. Their hulls were scarred not by weapons, but by something far worse, the touch of beings that existed beyond normal reality. The surviving crew members huddled in their quarters, many of them no longer entirely sure what species they had originally been. Commander Vextar sat in his damaged command chair, staring at screens that flickered between showing normal space and impossible geometries that hurt his mind to perceive. His tactical officer had been replaced by something that looked identical, but occasionally forgot which dimension it was supposed to exist in. Half his crew spoke in mathematical equations now, having learned a new language during their brief contact with the entities. The journey home took weeks instead of days. Their jump drives worked sporadically, sometimes launching them backwards through time or sideways into parallel realities before finding their way back to normal space. Whatever the ancient humans had done to them was still affecting their technology, their minds, and their understanding of what was possible. When they finally reached Kelvan space, their arrival caused immediate panic. Emergency protocols activated across the Empire as sensors detected the impossible energy signatures still clinging to the surviving ships. Military commanders who had served for decades took one look at the readings and ordered their fleets to maintain maximum distance from the returning vessels. The debriefing took place in a specially constructed chamber, with the survivors separated from their questioners by multiple layers of shielding. Even then, several intelligence officers had to be removed from the room when they began speaking in languages that didn't exist and drawing symbols that moved on their own. "Tell us what happened," demanded Fleet Admiral Keythron, the Empire's highest military authority. "Your reports make no sense. You claim that a primitive world somehow destroyed most of our conquest fleet?" Vextar laughed, but the sound was wrong somehow. containing harmonics that made everyone in the room feel uneasy. Primitive. Admiral, we never encountered their civilization at all. We met their prison guards. Explain. The humans living on Earth today aren't the same species that built those containment systems. They're descendants, maybe millions of generations removed from their ancestors. They live normal lives, raise families, grow old and die just like any other species. But they're also wardens, keeping watch over something that should never be released. The Admiral frowned. You're saying they're guarding something? What could be so dangerous that an entire species would dedicate themselves to containing it? Themselves, Vextar replied simply. They're guarding what they used to be. Over the following days, the survivors shared their impossible story. They spoke of beings that had transcended every natural law, entities that could rewrite reality with a thought and existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. They described the ancient humans who had become so powerful that they broke the universe itself, creating the forbidden zones that every spacefaring species learned to avoid. The evidence was undeniable. Deep space monitoring stations throughout the galaxy confirmed that the mysterious relay beacons had all activated simultaneously during the incident. Ancient structures that explorers had found on dead worlds suddenly made sense. They weren't ruins of lost civilizations, but components of a vast prison system designed to contain something unimaginably dangerous. Within months, every major government in the galaxy received the same message. It came through their most secure communication channels, bypassing all encryption and security measures as if they didn't exist. The transmission showed a middle-aged human man with tired eyes and graying hair, sitting in what appeared to be a simple office. "My name is Do-Yun Choi," he said calmly. "I represent the current generation of humanity, and I'm speaking to you now to prevent future misunderstandings." His image flickered slightly, and for just a moment, the alien leaders watching could see something vast and ancient, looking out through his eyes before the human facade reasserted itself. "We gave the Kelvarn Empire one warning, because we remember what it was like to be young and curious, and convinced that we could handle anything the universe might show us. Your species are still learning, still growing, still discovering what's possible. We don't want to rob you of that experience." He paused, looking directly into the camera, as if he could see through space and time to address each leader personally. "But there are some doors that must remain closed, some powers that should never be awakened, some questions that shouldn't be asked because the answers would drive you mad. The greatest act of mercy my species ever performed was building our own cage and choosing to stay inside it." The transmission continued for several more minutes, with Do-Yun explaining the new reality that every spacefaring civilization would have to accept. The Sol system was now marked as forbidden territory in every star chart. Ships that approached within a certain distance would be politely but firmly turned away. And if anyone ever again threatened to break the containment around Earth, the consequences would be far worse than what the Kelvarn had experienced. "We gave you one warning," he concluded, "because warnings are what civilized beings give each other. Consider this your graduation from innocence. Welcome to a universe where some sleeping gods are better left undisturbed." The message ended, and across the galaxy, every major power quietly erased Earth's location from their official records. Some knowledge they had learned was too dangerous to possess. The age of galactic conquest was over. The age of careful respect for ancient warnings had begun.